Recession 2020 is coming. It's coming, my friends. Recession in 2020 is coming. How do I know? Because the media is telling us this. Let's take a brief time travel, if you will. 1991, George H.W. Bush was running for re-election. Reagan had been in office since, the Republicans had been in office since 1990, and it had been basically a 12-year just domination of the Republican Party over the Democrats for the national election. All right. After the first Gulf War, during the first Gulf War, when George H.W. Bush had approval ratings in the 90s, a lot of the more mainstream Democrats stepped back, like Mario Cuomo, a couple others too. But this guy named Bill Clinton came to the forefront, and he survived his issues with peccadillos for some reason. Obviously, the same time Clinton was surviving it, they got rid of Bob Packwood for a lot less of accusations than Bill Clinton had. But the media supported him, lock, stock, and barrel. Just a fact. Anyway. So what happened was, why did Clinton win? A lot of people say it's because of the economy. It wasn't the economy, it was Ross Perot. And Ross Perot had it in for George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush did not follow through on his read my lips. I mean, just horrific. He got played by George Mitchell, the senator from Maine. It just was embarrassing to watch that whole thing shake out. So Bush did not have the typical people in the Republican Party were not in favor of Bush because he raised taxes after he said he wasn't. I mean, he basically was called out for being a liar. He lied about it. And rightly or wrongly, he thought he was going to get spending cuts that his party would at least obey. His party would at least be happy for. Say, hey, yeah, you're raising taxes, but you're getting spending cuts because the Democrats have said that. And of course, the Democrats never follow through on that, and it cost Bush the election because he did not carry his own base. It wasn't because the economy was in recession. Now, how does this factor in today? Because if you were alive back then or following politics, you would have heard a million times this Sunday that we were in the worst recession since the Great Depression. Every single time a Republican is running for re-election as president, you are going to hear that same mantra. We are in the worst recession since the Great Depression. Every single time. And back then, there was no Fox News. I mean, it had just had Rush Limbaugh. He'd only been going for 4 years previous, so his audience wasn't very big. I remember I was in D.C. We had G. Gordon Liddy on the WMAL talk show in D.C., but that was it. I mean, we basically we had some guy named Mark Davis who was, I'll never forget that guy, and I think he subbed for Rush a couple times, and that guy I'll never forget saying the Republican Party was young Nazis. When in the 1992 convention, they were basically full of young Nazis because they were supporting Buchanan, and they were booing the conventional Republicans. I'll never forget that. I'll never forgive him for that. I thought that was you're going mainstream, and Mark Davis. I know he's still on the right, but I'll never forget that. And so basically the whole point was that the Republican Party was at the beginning of its implosion because you had the George H.W. Bush people, and they were not representative of the entire party. And the party has since, I hate to even say shifted to the right, I'd say shifted to more blue collar, where the elitists have stayed, George H.W. Bush and whatnot, and the regular Republican Party of the Pat Buchanan whatnot has actually gained momentum, and more people from the old globalist Republican Party have now joined our side. And me too, as a matter of fact. Well, actually, even back then, I wasn't a fan of George H.W. Bush. I don't even know if I ended up voting for him. Maybe I even voted for Ross Perot. But I had Ross Perot bumper stickers on my car. I remember back then, I was, even though Rush Limbaugh was anti-Ross Perot, it turned out that he was wrong, and Ross Perot was right. The giant sucking sound to the south of NAFTA, all this other stuff that Ross Perot was talking about turned out to be very prescient. And he just died, so R.I.P. Ross Perot. And Rush Limbaugh wasn't big on George H.W. Bush, but he recognized the state of the Democratic Party with Hillary care and whatnot. Man, we heard it all the time, the greatest recession since the Depression, all the time. And we just did not have it, just like George W. Bush, they did not have a fighter to stand up and say, this is nuts. This is nuts. You guys are full of crap. Because by the time the 1992 rolled around, which was the the election year, there was no longer a recession. The recession was tiny. It did hardly anything to people. Now look, I get there are always people who get laid off, always people lose jobs. I'm not saying it did do something to specific people. As an economy as a whole, though, it wasn't a national crisis that the media was making it seem. In fact, Rush would always say, I always thought this was pretty interesting. He would say in his talk show, how come everyone, you ask anyone, ask 100 people, they're all saying they're doing good. Ask the same 100 people if they think a recession is coming or if the economy's sour, they all say it is. And I always thought that it just showed you the power of the media. You ask 100 people, they're saying they're doing well, but they're always saying a recession is here and the economy, the country as a whole is not. And the reason for that is because the media was just hammering that we are in the worst recession since 1990, since the Great Depression. It's just freaking bullcrap. And they're going to do the same thing now. And they are doing the same thing now. A lot of people think the economy is a doldrums, even though you ask them personally, they're doing fine. It's the same thing with the retirement crisis. A lot of people are doing fine in retirement, but they think there's a crisis. It's the media. So that's how I know there's going to be a recession. Not because there actually is a recession, but the media is going to make it seem like there is one, and you're going to think that we are in one, and thus we need to change our course. And it's look, man, this stuff has been tried. I mean, the Democratic rulemaking is hammer the Republican for wanting to get rid of Medicare and Social Security, say the economy is in doldrums, and I'll never forget they had I remember walking to campus. Remember, I just got out of the Army. I had just signed up for George Mason. And I remember walking like one of my first days of school at college. I just walking down the corridor there going to get my car. And the guy came up and he had a picture of Bill Clinton with glasses and a saxophone saying, "In the cure for the blues," or "the cure for what blueses you," or something. I can't remember. But basically the idea was the economy is in such a doldrum that Clinton was going to solve it. And I just remember that. I said, the economy is just doing fine. It was doing fine. And the quote-unquote recession was gone by then. And everyone acknowledged that. The economists all acknowledged that. They said, we're no longer in a recession. It didn't matter. It did not matter. The Democrats and the media bosses, which with the Democratic politicians are the bootlickers of the media bosses. I mean, this is absolutely, the media isn't the bootlickers, the Democrats. It's the exact opposite. The Democrats get their marching orders from the media. And the Democrats said, the media said, hey, we're going to say it's we're going to say it's recession, we're going to say it's recession. And no matter what other people say, we're going to just hammer this mantra. Thankfully now we got, Fox News doesn't like Trump anymore, Trump doesn't like them, but we still have other sources of independent media. YouTube's going to crack down on that. I know that's what's going on because they know they are the source of independent media. I get that. So while they're not going to kick you off the platform, they may or may not demonetize you, but they're certainly not going to give you out there in the algorithm. I mean, just type in Google. Just go to Google and Paul Joseph Watson. You'll find all the negative stuff that comes up on Paul Joseph Watson, which is nuts because he has almost 2 million subscribers. Why would not his own stuff come up under Google? Because Google algorithm is biased. We know this. Go to DuckDuckGo, even go to Bing, Paul Joseph Watson. You'll see Paul Joseph Watson, his own content shows up. But if you go to Google, Paul Joseph Watson, you will see it's not Paul Joseph Watson's content that shows up. It's anti-Paul Joseph Watson. I mean, this is how Google and YouTube operate. I get it. I mean, it's their platform. I'm a sharecropper. They do whatever they want. But at the end of the day, they're still trying to tip the scales in favor of the liberals. This is a fact, man. It cannot be debated. And don't tell me their algorithm is fair. It simply cannot be true. It's not true. So anyway, what we know is that there is more independent media. They will be getting shafted in Facebook and in YouTube. I get that, but they're still there. We have blogs out there now. We have mass amount of self-produced content out there that is getting around. Like Steven Crowder, you can pay for his subscription. But the issue is, even if you're but the problem is that's great for us people who believe in freedom and know that the Democratic Party of today is not for freedom. We know the sources to go to for our political, what we need to hear for sure. I go to instapundit.com. I go to powerlineblog.com. I go to the Hoover Institution, things of that nature. I mean, that's where I go to Breitbart. That's where I go. All these places where I go for my political leanings for sure. But they will not be getting fair treatment under the algorithms. We know that. So now you got these, middle of the road, moderate leaning people who may or may not know where to go. They go into Google by default, and they're going to see the anti-Paul Joseph Watson stuff as opposed to Paul Joseph Watson's own stuff. That's still much better than what it was, though. And thankfully, you also have a president now who's not afraid of using his bully pulpit to fight back. And that's what George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush neither did. And the irony of it all is both George W. and George H.W. had huge presidential approval ratings in the beginning of their presidency because of the war. Because there's always this thing called rally around the flag. Whenever there's a war, you support the troops by supporting the president. And because of that, it's almost like they shot it too soon, if that makes sense, because they got this huge approval rating, but it's still too long to go before the election, and then people started getting disenchanted when the media slowly started fighting them, chink by chink in the armor, until the armor is basically gone at that point. And so when that happened, and then it came election time, and George H.W. Bush, they said, is the worst recession since the Great Depression, which is completely false, but it worked. It wasn't in the media. Again, it was Bush's own insanity. He couldn't keep his base. Trump's not doing that. Trump's saying, no, I'm going to keep my base, and he's gonna do what we on the right have always said. George W. and George H.W. should have focused left on the middle and focused more on retaining their base. And the fact that Ross Perot had 20% of the vote, 19 to be exact, Clinton only had 43%. It's not a fantasy to think that the vast majority of Ross Perot's voters were George H.W. Bush types, i.e. the Trumpsters. I'm telling you right now, I'm sure some of those people from Clinton were, but if George H.W. Bush could have retained those people, he would have won going away, because Clinton only got 43%, because Ross Perot was able to take Bush's blue-collar votes away, for sure. And people say, but they're going to drive all the corporatist Republicans to the Democrats. Well, if you're a corporatist Republican and socialism is your answer, I don't know what to tell you, man. So let's just say the 37% of the vote George H.W. Bush got. I was one of them. I think I did vote for Bush. I think I came back to the home. I think I did, which was the first time I ever voted Republican, by the way. But let's just say you were a corporatist Republican, the 37% who did vote for George H.W. Bush. Are you now going to say, using that for example, that you were going to vote for Elizabeth Warren? I mean, because Biden, he's not going to be the nominee. That guy's just, he's lost it. It's going to be Elizabeth Warren because she's a more passionate Hillary Clinton, which is funny. But anyways, so think about it. You're a corporatist Republican. Who's these guys? I don't know. It's not the never Trumpsters, but a general corporatist chamber of commerce type Republican. You're working for a big firm. You know what I'm saying? Are you going to literally vote for Elizabeth Warren? The answer is no, because she's gone crazy. At least back in the day, Clinton, he had his sister soldier moment, so he seemed like a moderate Democrat. And the truth be told, he was. But that was back in the day when the Democratic Party allowed you to be moderate, when they actually competed in the South. I mean, don't forget, Clinton won Indiana. I'll never forget their election returns came in at 8 o'clock at night, and Clinton won Indiana, I think Kentucky, but I know it's Indiana and Georgia. He won those states. And now, we get the first returns, and Indiana and Georgia are deep in the red for whoever the Republican nominee is. Missouri was a big bellwether state. That's not anymore. Ohio was a big bellwether state. That's not anymore. The Democrats are just in, they've taken over Virginia, I get that. But the Democrats are now just a big urban metropolises, and that's it. You take away the urban base. That's why I always say if the Republicans can increase their percentage of black vote just to 15%, the Democratic Party is doomed. They'll be doomed because they have no base anywhere else. It's just the urban coastal elitists, the rich people, and then the urban New York, Los Angeles, whatnot, Chicago. If the Republicans can get 15% of that black vote, it's over for them. That's why I keep telling, not that he listens to me, you got to hammer on illegal immigration, hammer on it. Bill Kristol and the Republican Karl Rove, they don't get that. They think, Trump is going to make the Bushy moderates, they're going to be so offended by Trump's tweets, they're going to go to the Democrats. I said they'll be offended by Trump's tweets, but they won't be offended when Joe Biden says they're going to put y'all back in chains. The whole thing is just silly, man. Silly on its base. So Trump is so offensive. People be offended by that guy because he said to Ilhan Omar to go back to Somalia. And all this crazy talk about Trump being a Nazi, and Trump supporters are Nazis. That won't offend the the mushy middle. Stupid. So this is why we know the media is going to go back to its tried and true, which is saying recession, recession, recession. And the more they say that, the more confident you got to feel that they feel that it's worrisome that they're not getting the traction they thought. Because what happens is the more scared they get, the more frantic they become. You see what I'm saying? The more frantic they become, the more the fake news comes out, and the more it's nervous Nelly, like, oh my goodness! And they'll always have a human story about, here's Mrs. Smith, she can't pay her rent because of Trump. Oh! They're going to always have those stories, and the more they do, the more empowered you should be to recognize that the media knows they need to do that to get the frantic nature built up. Now again, the media tried this in 1992. It worked to the extent that it did make people think there was a recession. Absolutely. Even in November 1992. It did. I'm no getting around that. Even though the people themselves did not feel it, they felt they're one paycheck away. That was the big quote of the day. You're just one paycheck away from losing everything. And here's Bill Clinton's saxophone to solve our blues. And it was silly back then. But Trump does not have a Ross Perot. Trump does not have a John Anderson from the Reagan time. You see what I'm saying? Now they're trying to get a John Anderson. That might be way too far for some of you guys to know who that was. But that was a corporatist Republican, a never Trumper, kind of a guy back in the day who thought Reagan was too far to the right. Carter obviously needed to be defeated, so he was paid for hook, line, and sinker by the Democratic Party to take votes from Reagan. I think he even got like 7-8% of the vote too. He got a good amount actually, and it was actually kind of amazing that Reagan still won when John Anderson got that kind of vote for sure, because that was all Reagan's vote. But that's what's happened. That's what the Democrats, not Democrats, the never Trumpers are trying to do here. They're trying to get some of these Republicans to be a John Anderson and take enough votes away from Trump that he can't carry Pennsylvania, Michigan, in Wisconsin, and Minnesota. He didn't carry Minnesota, but he's only 44,000 votes last time. Pretty good chance he carries Minnesota, but they're trying to get some guy in there to carry enough of the corporatist vote that he won't be able to take 4% away, that he won't be able to carry those votes. They tried to do that with a guy from Utah, a Mormon guy last time, to take enough votes away from Trump in Utah that Utah would flip to the Democrats. And they said even if Utah flips, even if Utah doesn't go to the Democrats, if it doesn't go to Trump, he can't win. It turned out they're wrong anyway. But anyway, so just be prepared. I mean, my goodness, you just laugh at them. The best thing you can do with idiots is laugh. Bullies, laugh. Media's bullies, man. Just laugh and say, all right, whatever. And then you just tell your friends, say whatever. And say, do you feel good? Yep. Why do you feel like there's recession? Well, because everyone else feels bad. Really? Have you talked to everybody else? Well, that's what the media's saying. Yep, exactly. That's the whole point. The media wants to show they still have the power. Don't get me wrong, they do. I mean, I think a lot of us on the right, and the libertarian right, of which I would hang my hat, I think the media's days are behind it. It's not in the least. Not in the least. The way to make the media's days behind it is not to pay attention. Really, that's the way to do it. Unfortunately, a lot of people in America, they just read the headlines. And if the media says, CNN has a headline that says, Trump